When an entrepreneur loves freedom and winning, they get hyper focused on their goal because they believe that that goal will get them what they want. So they get caught in the narcissistic fantasy. So they get very narrow tunnel vision of, I need to get to X million dollars. And that's all they can focus on. Now, if my integrator comes and says that's a terrible idea, or they say no, they now look at the integrator as an obstacle to that goal. And now the integrator becomes the enemy.
Rachel, thank you so much for joining me today. We've got a ton of stuff to cover. One of the interesting things about our initial conversation is how much focus and attention that you're putting into the integrators and the integrator community. And I want to get into all of those amazing things. What I wanted to start with, though, was your story, because I think your story is very interesting. And you're a third generation entrepreneur. And tell me, what's that like growing up in an entrepreneurial household, third generation entrepreneur? What are some of the lessons? What are some of the things that you're seeing as you're growing up that's really starting to kind of shape your perspective on business?
Thank you so much for having me, first of all. I really love having these conversations, and our conversations have always been so in depth. So I'm sure we're going to go really deep here today. But growing up in a entrepreneurial household, third generation, my grandmother was a Holocaust survivor, and she was an entrepreneur, and she sold school supplies. And then my parents, and then me. I think I've learned good and bad things. And I always say that the biggest takeaway for me was watching how employees acted very differently when the boss was around versus not. And that got me very intrigued into behavioral science in the workplace. And I was determined to get a degree in, industrial psychology, business behavioral science. And I remember telling my dad, saying, I don't want to be a regular therapist, I want to be a business therapist. I want to understand how people work in the workplace. And it really set up my trajectory for later on. I think the things that I've learned looking back is I think the older generation focused a lot on working harder, and we're working a lot on working smarter. So that's, a lesson. We learn lessons from the good and the bad, right? And I think that's a lesson that we've learned. And I think that I know it's going to sound ambiguous to say this, but growing up in an entrepreneurial family, there's just something that you can't learn later in life. It's ingrained in you, like the value of time and money, and and I try to teach that to my kids, right? Giving them authority over small amounts of money, saying, where do you want to spend this? How do you want to spend it back? Having to punch a time clock. I had to punch a time card from when I was 10, 11, and I got $5 an hour, and how it made me feel, and saving up that money, seeing the money grow, making decisions where I want to spend. I balanced ledgers. I took inventory, right? All these things are things it's business acumen that's just ingrained in me, that I think it can't be taught, but I think we can teach our kids very early this business acumen.
I love it. And what you talked about something really interesting there, which was this notion of people act differently when the boss is around. And it sounds like that was some of your inspiration for getting into the psychological dynamics that are happening kind of behind the scenes. And I loved what you said there about you don't want to just be a therapist, you want to be a business therapist. What are some things that you've learned about that? Is this a matter of how leaders approach can change the dynamics of how their team operates in their presence? Is this something that is naturally and occurs throughout all organizations? Therefore, different tactics and strategies need to be used. When you started to go down that path, what did you learn? What did you discover?
So I think as much as we want to change the autonomy and the landscape of how business works, I think acknowledging this is step number one, and also is a huge resolution. Meaning, as a boss, as a visionary, knowing that your people will act differently when you leave, just by the mere fact that you paid them and that they want to please you. I think it comes from pleasing. And everybody wants to please the visionary. And that's also that's also why I spent so much time developing all these things around integrators, because I saw that from everybody in the organization, the integrator wants to please the visionary the most. They're the closest to the visionary. So they might say yes to something because they're trying to please the visionary and they want to look good and they want to look productive and they want to look like they're doing so well. But on the other hand, it might be a disservice because now they overcommitted or said yes to something that they can't, or feel resentful and burned out. And this goes on a different scale to everybody else in the organization. So by visionaries merely knowing that everybody wants to please me because I'm the visionary, I own this company, and at the end of the day, I'm paying them, that already, takes the pink elephant out of the room. And it might help visionaries be more empathetic and curious and listening and approach conversations differently and say, hey, I know you want to please me, but let's do what's right for the company. Let's do what's in your, role. Let's see what you're actually capable of, rather than setting unrealistic expectations.
You talked a little bit about this notion of ownership, and I've seen this debate that's been happening all over social media. And I guess about a month ago, someone came out with this concept or notion of founders mode. And founders mode is this like, it's a little bit of micromanagement, and the founder, the owners always kind of have their hands in things. And one of the arguments for operating in founders mode, which to me kind of sounds like a veil of like, you can hide under, you could say I'm in founders mode, but it allows me or okays the behavior of micromanagement. But it's always justified through ownership. And what they say is that people that don't have true ownership over the company will never care about the problems or the vision or anything like the owners do. When that ownership is non-existent, how can a visionary, how can an integrator start to really get people to act like owners where they might not actually have ownership inside of the company?
I want to take a different take on this conversation. Allow me to do that, okay? I think the question we need to ask is, what creates micromanaging? Why is this visionary feeling like they need to micromanage? Because I coach a lot of integrators one-on-one, and when they say, well, my visionary became micromanaging, I'm like, instead of vilifying the visionary, let's talk about what created that need. And I am going to publish in the next few days this free guide. It's called How to Speak Visionary, and it's 10 principles on how to speak to visionaries. And one of the things is that when visionaries don't feel a sense of urgency, which is that founder mode, and when they are left in the dark, so they're not getting concise updates, that's when they become micromanagers. Because if we understand the DNA of a visionary, where they're coming from, visionaries want two things, okay? Founders, visionaries, entrepreneurs. They want a sense of freedom and winning. The reason they became a visionary in the first place, and you're laughing.
It resonates. Like that's it. That's so it. Keep going. Sorry, that's good.
Okay. So you either opened up Talent Harbor because you worked for somebody else and you said, I can do this better. Or you worked somewhere and you felt controlled and you said, I don't want anybody to tell me what to do. Those are the two reasons usually people open up businesses. And when they get overwhelmed and they hire their assistant, their integrator, suddenly they're finding that people are telling them what to do. And it puts them into that box. So now they feel constrained. And I think it's important for integrators to understand that we need to honor a visionary's DNA for freedom and winning. Now, when you're going dark and you're not delivering, timely updates, they don't feel that winning. They feel that things have stalled. They have a sense of urgency. So when we can appreciate the sense of urgency more than ownership, and this is about where alignment needs to happen. One of the things I talk about to integrators is we need to create a list. EOS talks a lot about creating a list of like a wish list. What do you wish as a visionary for your integrator to do? That's great, but we also need to create a non-negotiable list. What are the non-negotiables? The sense of urgency in replying to emails, the way I want you to respond to customers, the kind of updates I need, what do I need to be involved in and what not, because there isn't enough clarity around the role of an integrator. So if we can create a list of non-negotiables, then now the integrator understands what the needs are of the visionary and they can serve that.
I love this. And yes, I started smiling when you talked about freedom and winning, because I think those, I've never articulated that before, but as you said those, I was like, that's it. Like that's the feeling there. And yes, like to your other point, like I've been in the Navy now for 22 years. But I've also been kind of this lifelong entrepreneur. There's always been like different projects that I was getting involved in. But for me, it was like, in the Navy, everything, like you can solve problems, but only within like a certain scope, and everything's very siloed. And to make real change, I feel like you have to be an entrepreneur. So not only did I have people telling me what to do, and the lack of freedom, I didn't feel like my ideas were necessarily winning. I'm still in today, and I'm in the Navy because I think that I can make a difference in people's lives. And like my big calling is really helping people and helping them understand and realize their full potential, whatever that may be for them. What makes a good integrator in that case? Because you talked about kind of speaking the language and understanding those types of needs. And so it sounds like there's solid communication skills and an understanding for how to operate with the visionary. What makes an amazing integrator?
Sure. So before we go to what makes an amazing integrator, I think most people don't realize the red flags of what a burnt out integrator looks like or an ineffective integrator looks like, right? And when you find yourself being resentful or you're slowing down, you're not enthusiastic anymore about the visionary's ideas, you're feeling like a burden, you're feeling like you took on too much, then you're burned out. And in order to be an effective integrator, what we don't realize is that we need to be an empowered integrator. And why I say that is that many integrators again get lost in that need to please the visionary instead of realizing that what the visionary really wants is an adult in the relationship. They want somebody that will say, this is what we could do, this is what we can do, somebody that sets boundaries, somebody that really is that voice of reason, because visionaries can see the mountaintops, right? They can see, years ahead, and they can see up in the cloud. What they cannot see is all the obstacles leading up to the mountains. And effective integrator is how, going back to that visionary loves freedom and winning. Here is what the danger zone is, okay? When an entrepreneur loves freedom and winning, they get hyper focused on their goal because they believe that that goal will get them what they want. So they get caught in their narcissistic fantasy. So they get very narrow tunnel vision of, I need to get to X million dollars. And that's all they can focus on. Now, if my integrator comes and says that's a terrible idea, or they say no, they now look at the integrator as an obstacle to that goal. And now the integrator becomes the enemy. So an effective integrator is the one that becomes a team and a partner rather than an enemy. And the way they do that is I lay it out with, I call it the ADD formula. And I say integrators need to get more ADD. And I say not the visionary kind, because visionaries are known to have like ADD, right? The ADD stands for assertiveness, decisiveness, and discernment. Assertive is learning how to communicate effectively by saying what you mean and mean what you say, giving empathy to the visionary. Nobody thinks about giving empathy to the visionary. Everybody is busy giving empathy to the whole leadership team. And everybody thinks the visionary is fine. Like they have tough skin. They can handle it. They built a business. But really, the visionary needs empathy. They need I know how much you want that idea to happen tomorrow. But unfortunately, it's not going to happen. Or here's what we need in order for it to happen, right? Learning how to have an assertive communication where you acknowledge the other side, you state your true feelings, how you feel and what you need, and then come to the middle and do what's best. That's assertiveness. Decisiveness is really being clear with your requests, your data, before you come to the table. Too many visionaries, and I've spoken to so many visionaries, they get frustrated by the integrator coming with like an open-ended conversation, raw plan, or this is what happens, I don't know what to do. Well, if the visionary has to figure out, then they don't need an integrator, and they feel like now they can't do what they do best because now they're problem solving for the integrator. Instead, if the integrator can come and say, here's what's happening, here's what I try, here's what I think I'm gonna do, I want your input, your guidance, your, objective, look on this. So now you're showing the visionary that you're capable and you can do it. You know what you want, you know what the end result should look like, and then you're just asking them for your input. Because one part of the DNA of a visionary that likes freedom and winning is they don't like to caretake. Like, if I have to take care of you and I have to worry about how I'm making you feel emotionally and all that, like, I run away. I just want to win. I don't want to be busy caretaking. While integrators are very good caretakers. So often we speak in the language of what we want, but if we realize that disconnect, then we can reset our expectations and show up more assertively in the relationship. And then the last thing, discernment, is that while visionaries are great at vision, they're not great at intuition. It's just a gift that they don't have. And people that are integrators naturally have the gift of intuition, which is discernment. We're able to see things from good and bad, great and not so great. We're able to, prioritize what's most important because you have more of an executive function. People that are visionary and driven just don't have the executive part of their brain working so effectively. That's what creates them more ADD and dopamine driven and more prone to addiction, right? People that are integrators do have better executive function, and you have to be able to utilize that. But if you get caught up in the way of your own fears, your own not knowing how to prioritize, self-doubt, low confidence, then you're not good at doing what's most important of you, which is to be a great discerner in the relationship.
Wow, that was packed, full of amazing advice. Wait, I agree with everything you're saying. I've had integrators over the last decade, and some amazing and some not so amazing. And there were some people on my team that wanted boundaries. And I guess as a visionary, maybe a self-proclaimed visionary, like for me, it's all about just getting the work done. Whenever that happens, like we get it done. And so emails flying at 1 a.m. it's not an abnormal thing for me. And like back to your like winning and progress and like need to move this forward. You said you talked a little bit about boundaries. How can an integrator set boundaries without creating the conflict? I think you called it enemies. Like if the visionary sees the integrator as an obstacle, then the relationship dynamics change. Super interesting topic. How do you prevent that when you've got crazy visionaries who just like want to get stuff done, and you've got an integrator who's like, there's a more efficient way to do this, and like the boundaries aren't a prohibitor from us accomplishing the goals. It actually helps us do that because it allows us to recharge and things like that.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I love this question because I think as a, society, we got the whole idea about boundaries wrong. Most people look at boundaries as, I'm going to make you do this, or like, you can't do this to me. And really, boundaries are internal. And it's, how am I going to react? What am I willing to do? Where does my role start and end? And absolutely, integrators create enemies when they set boundaries in a way where like now you're being a punitive parent, instead of using this formula of empathy, using a way of saying, you can send emails at 1 o'clock, but unfortunately I cannot respond at 1 o'clock. I will respond 6 o'clock in the morning. That's the earliest I can respond. So now you're free to do whatever you want. I gave you your freedom, but I also let you know how much I can do. So now you're not feeling constricted, right? Boundaries it's internal. It's like, this is what I will do. This is how much I can do. You can do whatever you can do. But if you talk disrespectfully to me, I'm going to walk out of the room. That's like a very clear boundary. Instead of so many parents and spouses say, you can't talk to me like this. Oh, you can't? Of course I can. I'm a visionary. If you're looking for a challenge, like you're in the perfect place to, because visionaries love a challenge. So if you're going to tell them they can't do something, then they will show you that they can. And I've learned to use this hack with my husband. I'm sorry, Ezra, I know you're going to watch this, but like when I need something from him, if I say, I can probably figure out how to get this package from A to B, but can you help me? He's like, you're going to figure out. Like, it's fine. But if I say, I don't think you can help me, I need to get this package from A to B. Ugh. He's like, of course I can help you. I'll figure it out, right? Because now I gave him a challenge. So it's learning how to communicate in visionary language in a way where you preserve your role, your confidence, and you don't overdo it and then become resentful.
That's really interesting. And a lot of the things that we're talking about right now is kind of advice to the integrator, and this kind of goes along the lines of a lot of what you've seen, what you've observed across the industry is that like the integrators are underserved from support and resources and an ecosystem standpoint. What about the visionaries? Like, what should the visionaries also be considering in the back of their head to like make life better for their integrators? Because like I know we're trying to figure out like, well, integrators, this is how you should show up each day. But we're also kind of like we're dealing with the faults of the visionaries. Are there better ways that visionaries can also approach this relationship to make sure that it's really symbiotic and effective in driving the mission forward?
That's a great question, and I have a two-part answer, which one part the integrators will hate, and the other part they'll love. And one part the visionaries will love and the integrators will hate. And the answer is like this. A visionary is naturally self-focused. So they tend to not see the other person because they're so hyper-focused on their goal. This is the foundation. This is where we need to start. And it's not in a bad way. It's just let's just say it. Let's have an agreement of what this actually looks like, right? But when we start from there, my biggest wish and my 3-year picture on my VTO for Empowered COO is to normalize personal coaching for integrators. Everybody, every great visionary, every great entrepreneur knows that a great entrepreneur has a great coach, and there's somebody, either a mentor, either they're part of a mastermind. There's so many masterminds, right? But they're getting their support from somewhere. And if visionaries can realize how important it is for integrators to get support, but not from a visionary coach, because again, somebody that coaches visionaries, their brain is wired to the freedom of winning, and they will pump that. But you need somebody that understands the DNA of an integrator. And the DNA of an integrator is they wake up every day and they say, am I good enough? And do people like me? So it's very different. Visionaries wake up every day and say, can I get more freedom of winning? And integrators wake up every day and they ask, am I being valuable enough? Am I giving enough? You know, they have a need to be needed and they have a need to be liked. And many integrators don't know that about themselves, but if they can sit with it and realize that whatever they're doing is really driving from that place, they will understand where they're getting trapped up. And that's the, difference I am looking to make with Empowered COO. So when we understand the resources that these integrators need of getting coaching and masterminds, that's the impact that visionaries can make. Because honestly, like, to expect visionaries to be more empathetic and whatever, that's asking for a lot. Because the things that make them so great are also the things that makes it so hard for everybody else. It's that hyper-focusedness that will get them to their goal, but it's also that hyper-focusedness that will make everybody feel like, why isn't he thinking about me, right? So the second part is, I come from the belief that you only need one spouse in a marriage to go for therapy for the marriage to improve. And hear me out on this one, okay? And this is for the visionary integrator relationship too. Integrator, let's say visionary is here, integrator is here, Okay, so visionary is more for those that are listening and not seeing. Visionary is, let's say, at step number 9. Integrator is at step number 6. Integrator gets personalized coaching, gets the resources they need, and they grow. But now they're outpacing the visionary. And I actually lay this out. I have a continuum that shows you on a scale of 1 to 5. You can go online and take my free assessment, and it will tell you where you are on the scale. I'm working on redoing the assessment results, beautiful results, really in depth. You're going to gain a lot of knowledge of where you are on how empowered you are. So let's say you're starting out at a -4 because integrators are on the negative side. Your visionaries at a 3, which makes them a little bit more healthier. But then you do all the work and you're going to a -1. But the visionaries at a 3. Now through that work, just by osmosis, there's something in our bodies called mirror neurons, and people tend to mirror the behaviors that others exhibit, which means on my personal level, I'm a mom of 3 little boys. If I am sitting and eating and my kid is like, can I get a cup of water? And I get up and I give them a cup of water, I now taught them how they can treat me. But if I sit and I say, well, mommy is sitting right now and I can't get up, I just taught my kid that it's not okay to do this, and next time he's going to go and get it for himself. So the healthier the integrator becomes and they hold their boundaries and they're assertive and they're just showing up steady, they're teaching the visionary how to act to them. And the visionary by osmosis becomes healthier. So for that, I think visionaries love that answer because they're like, oh, I don't have to do the work. But the answer is that they're doing the work, but they're just not like sitting in and doing the work that way. They're doing it by osmosis. And what happens sometimes, integrators become very healthy and then they decide to leave the relationship, or then the visionary becomes healthier and then the integrator has to catch up. And it's always about, self-development within the workplace.
When you talk about coaching for an integrator, so I've been a part of Vistage. I'm trying to think if I've had other business coaches. I surround myself with a lot of mentors, and you're right. Like a lot of these people are also visionaries, and so there's like a certain approach that that happens there. Coaches for integrators, like what's the approach, or what's the difference in approach when you show up for an integrator versus all the great coaching that's happening out there for visionaries, because it doesn't seem like it's happening very often for integrators. So I love that you're going down this path and this is a big initiative for you.
Yeah, I don't think it exists much. There's like maybe 3 integrator coaches that I know, and they don't, what I've done is I've cracked the code on the difference between visionaries and integrators and how we coach them differently. And the baseline for that is talking to people to their need. So when you're coaching a visionary without you knowing it, you're talking to their need of freedom and winning. When I coach integrators, I talk to their need of being nice and valuable and needed. And when they get trapped and where they get caught up, I help them get out of that. I help them say, are you afraid that you're not good enough? Or what are you afraid of? Oftentimes people come with a problem that looks like a data problem or a process problem or a people problem, right? Having a hard time firing this person. The first question after we go through, well, are they core values matched? Do they have a scorecard? That's a basic question. The next question is, what are you afraid of? And then it's, maybe I'm afraid to have that hard conversation because then I'm going to look like a mean person. Or who am I to be the integrator because I am, 10 years their junior. Or I'm afraid of the visionaries pushback. But nobody goes there. Nobody goes to what is my fear. Because when we talk to visionaries, we're like, oh yeah, I have a fear of failure. And by the way, today's a great day to talk about the fear of failure because I've been thinking about this for the last week, and I think we got the word fear of failure all wrong. Fear is something you're afraid of because you're for your safety. I'm afraid to walk out at night because somebody might, attack me. I'm afraid of going in the woods because maybe a bear is going to come out. That's fear. What's fear of failure? It's very intangible. And the truth is, what we're afraid of, fear is not the end of it. We're afraid of the shame that comes with the fear of failure. I am so afraid that if I fail, I will not be able to go out. I will not be able to be part of this society. I will not be able to go to this, club. I will not be able to put my face out in the world. face people, my family, and all that. And I think it's time for us to talk about the shame of failure rather than the fear of failure. Because that's the shame that integrators carry. It's the shame of not being good enough. It's the shame of I'm not a nice person because I'm having a hard conversation. So it's understanding the exact opposite of the visionary is the integrator and talking into that.
As you started bringing up the fear of failure and you started to go down that path, immediately my brain was racing to like, how would I describe it? And I went in the same. I think the first word that I thought of was embarrassment, but same thing. Embarrassment, shame. It's an emotional response to other people's perceptions. Because at the end of the day, like failure is growth, failure is learning, and I think we've gotten to this place where we're constantly trying to kind of celebrate these things because we know we have to do those things in order to understand how not to do them again and start to succeed. And so as you were saying that, like we were in lockstep because that's what it is. It's other people's perceptions.
Yeah, and I think if we can examine that shame, okay, just to take this home, right? That shame exists on the visionary side and on the integrator side. And if we can humanize that and we can say, and I often do a little bit personal over here and I say, like, where are you carrying that message from? Who told you that if you don't please, if you are not valuable, then it's something to be ashamed of? And the same thing is for visionaries. Who told you that if you're not winning, or if you're not macho and free, that you're not good enough? And it really comes back to a message that we received in our childhood of somebody telling us, or maybe society, that this is the only way that we can show up or be good. And if we can debunk that message and we can say, this is not my message, I am good enough, I'm great. And you know what? Something that I make integrators do when they coach with me, I make them write their resumes, even if they're never leaving their job, because I want them to see in front of their eyes what their strengths are, what are their emotional, intelligent capabilities, what are they great at, what makes them so great, because oftentimes they forget. So I just make them write their resume so they remind themselves, I'm already great, I just want to be better.
I love that. And when I think there hasn't been a company that I've managed yet, Hunt to Killer, Run for Your Lives. Run for Your Lives ended in a ball of flames. But there hasn't been a company that I've led, created yet that hasn't gone through a rough patch. And like the exercise that I would have to constantly run through my brain is like, well, what's worst case scenario? And I would have to play out the entire worst case scenario to then understand of like, it's to your point of the resume. Because one of the things, I'm not an integrator, but if I were an integrator, one of the things looking at my resume would do for me is give me the confidence to understand that like, one, we can succeed. Two, I've got the skill sets, and three, it doesn't matter where I am. Like I can bring my A game. And that's kind of what happened on my end as, companies have been in really tough spots and really great spots, whatever. I would remind myself of like, even if we had to start over today, like it's not the end of the world. But to your point, like we have to paint that picture or we just get lost in our heads and then it becomes all consuming and a detriment to what we're trying to do.
Yeah. And talking about like, it's okay, I'm going to start all over again. That's a visionary mindset. And what I think we can see how great this issue is when we look at the amount of fractional integrators. I think that is actually, it's telling of something that's going on under the surface that nobody's talking about. Why? Because a fractional integrator in some ways is becoming an entrepreneur. And what many of them are telling me, I never ever wanna work for a visionary again. So they're saying like, I don't want to be controlled anymore by a visionary. I want to own my time. I want to own my calendar. I want to own my value. And when I ask them what makes the difference, what's the difference between a full-time integrator and a fractional integrator? And the truth is a fractional integrator sets the terms of service. So they're basically having great boundaries. They're walking in, they're saying, this is how much I'm going to charge. This is when I'm going to be available. And this is what I will help you achieve. And if every full-time integrator can walk into their role like that, like hallelujah, because you don't have to abandon yourself and say, I'm going to become a visionary in order to be my best self. You never ever hear a business owner saying, I failed at one business, being a business owner is not for me. I'm going to go and be an integrator. We don't hear that, but we're hearing integrators say this all the time. Being an integrator is not for me. I'm going to become a fractional. I'm going to become a business owner. And then they're molding themselves into something where they're never meant to be. It's not their unique ability. They're not using all their strengths because they got so burnt by that role. But really what they were missing is the assertiveness, decisiveness, and discernment that they anyways need when they become a fractional.
Do you think that this could just be like a middle chapter in their story? And what I mean by that is, like, let's say there was a relationship that kind of got them to burn out, and they were still trying to figure out the ADDs and how to work through those. And then it was just churn and burn. Now they've left, and they're like, I'm never doing that again. That was not for me. Then they become fractional. As they introduce these boundaries through contracts and setting the terms and things like that, do you think that there will like, maybe you're seeing it already, or maybe we're too early days on this, do you think there's going to be a turn where they're like, oh, wait a minute, this is actually pretty great. I've realized my full potential. Now I can go become an integrator for someone because I know how to set expectations, boundaries, and deal with visionaries in a healthier way?
Yeah, I believe, like, first of all, I believe that we cannot get enough done fractionally. And I wish we would have more what I would call short-term engagement integrators. So somebody that goes in and says, I'm going to be there fully for 3 to 6 months. I'm going to set you up at a very high level. And then I'll get somebody in that's really good at just like, because there's already systems and things created, and I will coach them and I will make sure that they can take this to the next level. So instead of fractional, where, we all know that when you get distracted on your phone, it takes about 25 minutes to refocus and get back into work. The same idea. Monday one place, Tuesday another place, Wednesday another place. We're not great multitaskers. I know we're telling ourselves that we are, but we aren't. So the concept of fractional is really, at the end of the day, I was speaking to a lot of visionaries, and they say, well, they got something, but they didn't get that depth, right, that a full-time integrator gets. And I think with short-term engagements, we would get more depth, we would get more emotional intelligence, we would get more people teaching people how to resolve conflict, how to be discerning thinkers. I think an integrator's job is to be a facilitator and a coach for the rest of the company, but if they can't coach themselves, then they're not effective. And what I teach them is to become their own coach. So that's, one side of it. And second of all, I am seeing a lot of fractional integrators that are coming to me for coaching because they're going out there and they're seeing they're getting tripped up in the same thing over and over again. And I tell this to visionaries all the time. I tell them, you think switching out your integrator is going to be the solution. Well, the answer is that in 6 months from now, you're going to find yourself in the same problem, a different version of it, maybe blonde hair instead of black hair. But the idea is, because of the dynamics of the relationship, if we're not aware of the behaviors that cause this trap, you're just going to be back there. And those fractionals are going out there and they're finding themselves again over committing to certain, clients, being disappointed. Or on the other hand, they're learning how to be assertive because they're getting coached, and then they're going back and they're actually saying, I love this so much, I'm going to go back to full time. So I've seen both happen.
Yeah, as you were talking, like, one of the things that I had thought of is we've had amazing fractional executives, and at Hunt a Killer, I think there was really 2 reasons that we didn't implode, and one was we operated on EOS, and so that was a breakthrough for us. And the second thing is we had access to incredible talent. We had the former chief accounting officer from T-Mobile. We had the former chief information officer from McAfee Security. So, like, we had incredible talent. It was on a fractional basis. And I think in those roles, it actually worked. Because when you think about, like, let's say it's a small team, and there's a finite amount of projects, like, it worked. They were able to do it. When I think about the integrator role, like, you're managing, or you're leading the leaders, and to lead leaders, like, you need to show up day in and day out. You need to set the example. There are a lot of things that are happening, and that's a hard dynamic to have a full-time leadership team, and then the person that's sitting above all of them is some sort of fractional. And it's like, when I think about a fractional integrator, it's almost like someone to come in and help us through L10 meetings and help us adopt the system and make sure we're all accountable. But I don't see how that could happen in, like, outside of that, like outside of assisting with these different things, like I would not trust, a multi-million-dollar company bringing someone in part-time as the number two.
Right, and also there needs to be a lot of trust to begin with. To trust somebody that's going to have hard conversations, that's going to disappoint you, set boundaries, hold you accountable at the same time. What an integrator is essentially doing is managing human energy, right? Because what's accountability if not human energy? So there has to be a foundation of trust, and I talk a lot about that trust in the visionary integrator relationship. Many integrators complain and say the visionary doesn't want to let go. They don't want to let go of the vine. They're such control freaks. They're so micromanaging. And I'm like, did you ask them why? Did you show the visionary that you're capable? Why should the visionary let go of the thing that's most nearest and dearest to them when you haven't shown them a reason why, proven yourself, or even asked what they need? It's a very simple ask. It goes as follows. Hey, visionary, what would you need in order to let this go? Would you be able to answer that, Ryan, if somebody asked you that?
Yes.
Sure, I need XYZ already. It's so simple. It takes the emotion out of it. It solves the problem, and now there's trust.
And you can almost build out, when you ask me that question, like time does play in that. Like I think immediately of the scorecard, and like maybe there's different measurables, and maybe there's different projects, and it's also over an extended period of time. And so you can almost milestone it where it's like you let go a little bit, and some things fall through and onto your plate, and they've demonstrated that they are capable and competent. You let go a little bit more. There's certainly ways to do it, but I love that question because, yeah, it's like you got to build that trust, because whoever's in these seats already like has built the systems, I'll give you a small example, and this is such a dumb thing, but like I couldn't let go of our shipping. And like it was something where like we printed all the labels. At this point we were probably shipping, I don't know, maybe like 3,000 packages a month. And we had cycle billing, which meant like regardless of when you joined Hunt to Killer throughout that month, you were getting rebilled on the first of the month the following month. And so it was 3,000 orders that came in. And like that was something that like I looked at, that was something that I closely managed, because if we accidentally put the wrong label on all these boxes, like now we've got 3,000 problems and the business is under. But something as small as that, I had trouble letting go. But we did it over time, and we did it with like different trust milestones where it's like, okay, you take it this far. And then eventually I never even thought about it again.
Yeah, exactly. And that's, I often say the difference between delegating and abdicating, right? Delegating is you're holding with one hand and you're letting go with the other hand. Abdicating is like, here you go, I walk away. And in the same sense, trust, I always talk about the trust jar. And that's, we need to put in order to take out. And if you didn't put in, you can't take out. And visionaries and integrators need to know that. You can't ask for blind trust. It's just not the place to do it.
Yeah. And it's like, what is it? It's earned in drops and lost in buckets. And so it's like you could spend all this time filling up your trust bucket, and then all of a sudden you just dump it out, and we're starting from scratch. As a visionary, let's say a visionary is like looking for an integrator. Like what are some amazing traits? What are some things that visionaries should be looking for when they're looking for their next partner, their next operator, the next person that's really going to manage the day-to-day of the business? Like, what are some of those telltale signs where you're like, they got to have these things, and if they do, like, give them to me and I'll help coach them up?
Ooh, I love that. I think, and this is not going to be a traditional answer, look for somebody that's very self-confident. They're not arrogant, they're just confident in what they do. Look for somebody that they are not looking to please you. So they're like, this is what I can offer. They stay steady, they don't get flustered. They're just okay with who they are. Because you're looking for somebody that, I always say, an integrator is like a triage nurse. Okay? So what does a triage nurse do? Like, urgent, somebody walks in, lacerations, things broken, they look, they don't get flustered, they don't get excited, they assess, and they plan a course of action. And that's all an integrator needs to do. So they need to really be able to be steady and say like, I'm not getting flustered. I'm not changing who I am. I'm not changing my values. I'm not vacillating. I'm really good at reading the room, discerning a plan of action, and taking it to the next level. And look for somebody that you really enjoy being around. Like, go on a few dates with them and just check your energy. Do I feel like I need to take care of this person? Or could this person take care of themselves? Because I think that's a very big trigger for visionaries. We don't talk about this, but this has to do with attachment styles. Visionaries are more avoidant attachment usually, because they're just like, if I am focusing on a goal, I'm not focusing on people, on taking care of people, on emotions and all that. I am emotional. I get excited. So we often get confused, like where it says visionaries are based on emotion, integrators are based on logic. Yes, sure. I go with my, my feelings. I'd love to have $100,000 whatever because it's emotional. It's how I feel. But I don't like taking care of other people's emotions. That's why I hire an integrator to hold accountable. Why can't visionaries hold people accountable? That's because they don't like hard emotions. They don't like hard, uncomfortable feelings. Like nobody ever thought about that and actually answered that question. They don't like uncomfortable feelings. So check with yourself if you're starting to have to compensate for the other person or they're holding their own.
When you say you said get along, and I forget, there was a book that I read maybe like a decade ago, and this guy was talking about, I only hire people I don't get along with because then they keep me straight. And like, I've done that a couple times and it never works out, ever works out. And so like, I agree with you. I think there has to be, you have to be comfortable around that person because you're going to share everything, like everything about the company, the success, the failures. And if you don't have that, like, why would you want to be miserable around someone, 9 hours a day or however long you're working? Doesn't make sense.
Yeah, and I think get along doesn't mean I'm never going to argue. Actually, there's healthy conflict that needs to happen. It's more, do I feel like I can be my authentic self around this person? Like, are they chewing loudly and it's annoying me? Or do I feel like I can relax, I can take off my jacket, I don't need to keep up my persona? Because as visionaries and entrepreneurs, yes, a lot of time we have to keep up a persona. We have to keep up a persona to our team. We're always performing. We're walking out on the floor, we're shaking hands, we're being the confident ones. Like the economy could be volatile and the visionary needs to stand up and say, I got you, this is gonna be great, we're gonna take this forward, right? That's the visionary's job, right? It's culture, it's making people feel safe. They need to have one place where they can fall apart, where they cannot show up as polished. And they could be like, I have no idea what I'm doing, and I just don't want to take care of this, or I want to be rude today. Like not in a way of being rude to people, but I just don't want to be polished,
All right. So talk to me about what you're up to, because I know you've got a book. You talked about an assessment. You said you've got an article coming out. You do coaching. I want to make sure that you tell the world all these things that you're working on, because I think they're pretty incredible, and there's nobody doing this, and that's one of the reasons I find this so interesting, is because like not only are you doing it, but based upon our conversation, like you're doing it well. So tell us what you're up to and what you're working on and where we can find you.
Thank you. You're so sweet. Thank you so much. So my website is empowertoo.com, and there is the free assessment that can tell you how likely are you to get burned out based on the 5 behaviors that cause burnout or empowerment. So how empowered are you? There is the book that's on Amazon. You can go buy it. It's called Empowered COO, Eliminating Burnout, Resentment, and Self-Doubt as a Second in Command. This is it. And then I am doing one-on-one coaching. You can, get a free discovery call with me and we'll have a conversation. And I'm working on more than putting out a course, putting out a platform that will give you real-time answers that you need. So it's going to be a course on the psychology and the foundation of how to be an empowered COO. There's going to be a community element, but even more so, I'm working on training an AI bot to think like me. So in real time, you're sitting at your desk and Visionary is having a request and you don't know how to speak Visionary or how to form it in a way where you can respect their freedom of winning. You can go into the bot and say, hey, help me respond to this email so the visionary hears me, right? And it's going to help you do that. So I'm excited for that. It's going to come soon. I wish sooner.
That's very visionary of you. We need to get it done. Like, why isn't it out yet? Awesome. Well, Rachel, thank you so much for taking the time this morning to jump on and talk to us about the integrator, the relationships, the dynamics. This is the first conversation where we've gone this deep. And I learned a ton. Like, I'm constantly trying to better understand how I can operate with an integrator. And so just wanted to thank you for jumping on and sharing your wisdom.
Thank you so much for having me. My pleasure.